Hey guys, so today we are going to go over how to install the AVS Motorsports Speedcover, which is an engine cover that's good for, this kit's good for LS1, LS2, and LS3 passenger car engines only. So within the kit, it comes with a pretty detailed instructional manual. It has all the parts that you see here. They're all labeled in the instructional manual from A to U. And it's pretty self-explanatory within the instructions. So a few of the tools that you are going to need, just simple tools for this install. You're going to need 2.5 millimeter hex, 1/8 inch hex, a 3/8 inch socket wrench, an 8 millimeter socket wrench, 10 millimeter socket wrench, and a 9/16 open-ended wrench. So nothing too crazy there. And a few items that you are going to need to buy in addition to the kit that is not provided are aftermarket fuel rails. AVS Motorsports, they recommend that the Holley, it's this Holley kit here, it's the 534-210 kit. And you're also going to need some anti-seize and some blue Loctite to install this kit. So fairly straightforward. So the kit, like I said earlier, is good for the LS1, LS2, and LS3 passenger car engines only. For our test engine today, we have here a brand new LS3 engine, which we are going to install the kit on. To start, the instructional manual, it has some pre-installation engine prep work that you gotta do before you actually install the kit. So we're going to start by taking off the 8 spark plug wires. So for the purpose of just video purposes, we're going to work from one side, and so just mirror whatever you do on this side that you can see in video to the other side. So you're going to first remove the 8 spark plug wires, and then second, you're going to over here remove the bottom left and the top right bolt with a 10 millimeter socket wrench. And again, you're going to mirror this on the other side, looking at the head, bottom left, top right. So after you have those 4 bolts out, we're going to be ready for the next stage to remove the stock fuel rails, where then we can install the Holley aftermarket fuel rails. All right, so we're now going to remove the factory fuel rails on our LS3 engine. So there's some fasteners that hold down some bracketry for the fuel rails, as well as some retaining clips that you're going to have to remove from the fuel injectors themselves. After you remove those retaining clips and the fasteners, the entire fuel rail, stock fuel rail set should remove from the engine. You can discard that, as we're going to put the Holley new one, and also discard the factory cover that comes on the LS. So now with the fuel rails in place, depending on your application, you can either install the fuel rail crossovers in the rear or in the front. So for demonstration purposes, we just installed our fuel rail crossover in the front, and we're just going to install the fittings. So the next step for our pre-installation engine prep, we are going to remove the oil fill neck from the oil fill location. After that, the pre-installation prep, which is labeled step 1 in the instructional manual, is complete. So we will be moving on to step 2. All right, moving on to stage 2 here of the installation process, which is titled Coil Pack Relocation for LS2 and LS3 engines only. So for LS1 kits, you guys are ready to move on to stage 3. So to start this process, you are going to unplug the main connector for the coil pack assemblies. So there's going to be one connector on each side. Again, mirror what you see here in the video with the other side. After you remove that connector, you're going to have to remove the fasteners on the bracketry there. Remove those fasteners and the entire assembly should lift off the head. So to disassemble the stock coil pack assemblies, we're going to take off the fasteners of the stock coil packs. There's going to be 8 coil packs in total, so 2 bolts per coil pack, 16 in total. You can remove the coil packs from the stock assembly and ready to install on the supplied bracket. So for the coil pack relocation brackets, I just want to show you which holes you're going to be using for depending on your application. So for our mock-up engine, we were using an LS3 engine. So the LS3 engine holes are going to be these right holes here. So again, LS3. LS2 engine are going to be the left holes. So over here, LS2. You're always going to be working with the top facing you, which is going to be labeled from the factory. So here is a completed coil pack assembly with the new bracketry. You're going to use a 10 millimeter bolt, 10 millimeter socket, and a 10 millimeter wrench from the back to tighten those down. Spacers are going to go in between the bracketry and the coil packs. So after you snug all those down, ×2 obviously, they're ready for to be reinstalled onto the engine. So we're now installing the new bracket assembly for the coil packs back onto the head with the 3 center hardware center bolts that we took out. So just make sure that you don't pinch any wires when you are tightening down those bolts. So make sure they're pulled off of the cylinder head in between the bracket. So we're going to snug those down. And again, mirror it on the other side. And we're moving on to stage 3. So using the bottom left and the top right opening mounting holes, we're going to install the coil pack studs with a 2.5 millimeter hex key. We're going to first start by installing the extended coil pack stud. So there's one stud that comes within the kit that's a little bit longer. Then we're going to move on with the 3 other coil pack studs that are all equal length. We're going to finish installing the bottom left one, and then you're going to mirror that with the other side with also the shortened studs. So after we have the 4 studs in place, we're ready to move on. So now we're going to slide the oil fill neck and cap the whole assembly into the oil fill hole. And we're going to follow that by threading on. First we want to hand thread the standoffs. So for this stud, you're going to use the shortest standoff that comes within the kit. So in the instructions, that shortened standoff's labeled F. We're going to tighten that up with a 9/16 open-ended wrench, followed by the taller standoff on the bottom left side. Snug that up with a 9/16 wrench, and we're going to mirror that on the other side with the 2 additional standoffs in the kit. We're going to start out by dabbing a little bit of Loctite, blue Loctite, on the button head screws there. Then we're going to lay in the valve cover screens within both valve covers, followed by the valve cover design insert. After we get the screen and design insert in place, you're going to put your Allen head screws within the valve cover. Then from the back side, you're going to thread in the nylock nut. So you're going to need an 1/8 inch hex key for the top of the valve cover and a 3/8 inch socket to snug up those bolts. After you snug up those bolts, you're obviously going to mirror this with the other valve cover. So we're going to take the 4 ARP valve cover bolts, which is labeled G within the instruction manuals. and you're going to slide in the washer, which is labeled I, followed by the white nylon washer, which is labeled Q within the manual. And always put a little dab of anti-seize within the bolts. Repeat that 4 times and set those bolts aside. Now we're going to slide the valve cover assembly over the coil packs and align the holes with the standoffs. Make sure that you're not, you may need to reroute the coil pack harness, so we want to avoid any chafing, wire chafing, so that doesn't happen. Now we can hand thread those ARP bolts into the valve cover. Lead those just hand tight for now. We're going to tighten all ARP fasteners in a later step. So depending on your application, you may need to do some slight trimming around the speed cover. So for this particular application in our LS3, we need to do some trimming around our alternator. So we're going to demonstrate how to do some trimming. And when doing your trimming, always remember that start with trimming less material, as you can always trim a little bit more. So a little bit less work to more. So the tools we use for trimming out our speed cover is we used a 3-inch cutoff wheel, hand files, and then a 80 grit sandpaper for a finish. And again, we just trim less and work out. So it took us 3 times. So with our trimmed valve cover back in place, we are going to reinstall our alternator. So when trimming out an accessory for your application, you want to make sure you have about a 1/4 inch gap, air gap around the accessory you're trimming out. So we're going to take the 10 ARP intake cover bolts, which is labeled H in the instruction manual, slide in a washer on each bolt labeled I, and always remember to anti-seize each bolt. You're going to do that 10 times, set all those 10 bolts aside. Now we're going to slide the intake cover on top of the 2 valve covers, aligning the holes. Hand thread all 10 ARP bolts, 5 on each side. We're going to do a final snug down on the final step. For the final stage of our installation process of our speed cover, you're going to replace the 8 spark plug wires, 4 on each side, followed by replacing or installing the oil fill cap. Then we're going to take our 8mm socket wrench and snug all 14 ARP bolts, the 4 on the valve covers and the 10 on top of the intake. We want to make sure that we do not over tighten these ARP bolts. We just want to go slightly past finger tight. After you get the 14 bolts snugged up, that is going to complete the installation process of our speed cover.